Welcome, listeners, to the Restricted Handling Daily Intel Briefs What's Coming Up Next Week in the World podcast. Here's your orientation for the week ahead, covering the major scheduled events, meetings, and timing triggers shaping the global security environment. Starting on Sunday, July 19th, China moves into the final stretch of the World Artificial Intelligence Conference and high-level meeting on global AI governance in Shanghai. Chinese President Xi Jinping and senior officials are expected to use the event to highlight China's ambitions in artificial intelligence, especially around global AI standards and technological self-reliance. This is another chapter in the broader US-China technology competition, where Beijing is trying to demonstrate that it can build a powerful AI ecosystem despite restrictions on advanced Western technology. It is very much a watch us build our own machine moment from Beijing, with China putting its technological progress front and center. Also on Sunday, China's monthly loan prime rate decision arrives. The People's Bank of China will be watched closely for clues about how Beijing is balancing weak credit demand against its reluctance to launch major new stimulus measures. The bigger story is the challenge facing Chinese policymakers, trying to reignite growth while dealing with consumer caution, property sector weakness, and broader economic pressure. Moving into Monday, July 20th, NATO begins its Innovation Range counter-drone campaign in Riga, Latvia, running through Friday, July 24th. The focus is on counter-unmanned aircraft systems, electronic warfare challenges, and lessons emerging from recent conflicts. Ukraine has shown the world that inexpensive drones can create expensive problems, and militaries everywhere are racing to adapt. This is one of those events that sounds highly technical, but it reflects one of the biggest shifts in modern warfare. Small systems are now forcing major militaries to rethink air defense, logistics, and battlefield awareness. On Tuesday, July 21st, the United Nations Security Council holds a briefing on the Middle East, with regional security issues including Gaza, Lebanon, and broader instability expected to dominate discussion. The same day, the Council is also scheduled to hold consultations focused on Syria. Expect familiar diplomatic positioning, humanitarian concerns, competing narratives from major powers, and arguments over regional security. The Security Council remains the place where the world's biggest disagreements get a microphone, even when consensus remains difficult. On Wednesday, July 22nd, the United Nations Security Council holds an open debate on natural resource governance and international security. This may sound removed from the daily headlines, but it connects directly to issues like sanctions evasion, critical minerals, war financing, and supply chain competition. Expect countries to use the forum to frame resource access and economic security through their own geopolitical lens. Also on Wednesday, the European Central Bank begins its monetary policy meeting in Frankfurt. The ECB's decision-making will be closely watched because energy prices, shipping disruptions, and Middle East tensions can quickly affect inflation calculations across Europe. The first day will largely set the stage for the more important announcement and press conference that follows. On Thursday, July 23rd, the ECB releases its monetary policy decision and holds its press conference. The focus will be on how officials assess inflation risks and whether geopolitical shocks are becoming a longer-term economic concern. Markets will be watching not only the decision itself, but also the language coming from ECB President Christine Lagarde. On Friday, July 24th, the Bank of Russia holds its key rate meeting, releases its updated forecast, and Governor Elvira Nabiullina holds a press conference. This will provide one of the clearest public indicators of Russia's economic condition. The Kremlin has continued prioritizing defense spending, but inflation pressures, fiscal strain, and the cost of sustaining the war remain major issues for policymakers. The battlefield tells only part of Russia's story. The economic endurance test continues behind the scenes. For Ukraine, the focus throughout the week will be on the country's new government following recent leadership changes. New Prime Minister Sergei Koretsky and expected defense leadership changes will be closely watched by allies looking for signs of continuity in military management, procurement, and preparations for the coming winter. During wartime, personnel changes always create questions about whether they represent simple adjustments or deeper shifts in strategy. And finally, the watch list items for the week ahead. Keep an eye on China-North Korea relations following recent high-level meetings between Beijing and Pyongyang. Watch for any movement on U.S.-China AI discussions after the Shanghai conference. Monitor the Israel-Lebanon process as technical discussions continue on implementing the framework agreement, and watch Ukraine's new leadership team for early signals on defense priorities and coordination with Western partners. That's your look ahead at what matters next week across Russia, China, Ukraine, the Middle East, and the wider global security landscape. Thanks for listening. The headlines will keep coming, so we'll keep sorting signal from noise. Find the daily written brief at restrictedhandling.substack.com, and we'll be back with more tomorrow.